501S Los Angeles Street was uninhabitable for like almost 2 years.
Yeah, and she's seeking damages, including unpaid rent totaling $12,500,
Wow.
which is the maximum allowed in California's small claims court.
Okay.
So filing for that maximum amount is a pretty bold move. It suggests she believes the impact of these living conditions was significant enough to warrant the strongest possible legal action in this venue.
That's a powerful statement. It makes you wonder what exactly she went through.
Right.
And that's where these photos come in, right? They're supposed to show the condition of the apartment.
Yeah, the photos, while disturbing, are a crucial piece of evidence.
Yeah.
We see water damage, crumbling ceilings, exposed pipes, issues that on the surface might just seem like inconveniences, but could point to much larger problems.
Like what? What kind of problems are we talking about?
Well, for example, that water damage could easily indicate mold growth, which is a serious health hazard. Mold isn't just unsightly,
Right.
It releases harmful spores into the air, which can cause respiratory problems, especially for vulnerable individuals like children or the elderly.
Oh, wow.
And in some cases, landlords have faced hefty fines and legal consequences for neglecting mold issues.
Wow.
Then you have those exposed pipes. If they're corroded, they could be leaking, leading to further damage and potential health risks.
It's amazing how much you can glean from just looking closely at a photograph. And honestly, some of these images are hard to look at.
Yeah.
There's one of what looks like the area under a sink, and there's this substance that, well, I'm hoping it's not mold,
Right.
but it definitely looks suspicious. And then there are photos of infestations, roaches, bed bugs, the whole 9 yards. It's unsettling to think someone was living like that.
It is, and those images provide visual evidence that supports Tiara's claims in the lawsuit.
Right.
They really paint a picture of neglect, which raises questions about the landlord's responsibility in maintaining a safe and habitable living environment.
And it's not even just about discomfort, it's about health and safety. I know prolonged exposure to pests like those can trigger allergies and even asthma,
Absolutely.
especially in kids.
And bed bugs are notoriously difficult to get rid of. The bites alone can lead to skin infections. And beyond the physical discomfort, there's the psychological distress they cause. It can be incredibly stressful and isolating to live with an infestation like that.
So we've got the lawsuit outlining Tiara's claims, and then we have these photos that seem to really back up those claims, but then there's this whole other layer, the citizen app alerts.
Right. Why we can't directly link these alerts to Tiara's case?
Yeah.
They do offer a glimpse into the overall safety of the building and the surrounding area. One report mentions a man with a knife and a machete at the intersection just outside the building.
And another one describes an aggressive man requiring both firefighters and police to respond right at 501S Los Angeles Street. And then there are multiple reports of gunshots on the third floor. It paints a pretty disturbing picture.
It does. These incidents taken together suggest a potentially volatile environment, which could strengthen Tiara's argument that the building was unsafe. Imagine living there, dealing with the conditions we've seen in the photos, and then hearing gunshots outside your door.
It's heartbreaking. It's a good reminder that we're dealing with a real person's life here, and the impact of these conditions goes far beyond just inconvenience.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really makes you think about, the bigger picture here. This case, while specific to Tiara, it really shines a light on the challenges so many people face when it comes to affordable housing, especially in a city like Los Angeles, where the cost of living is so high.
It makes you wonder what recourse people have when they find themselves in these kinds of situations. I mean, where do you even begin to fight back against something like this?
Well, that's where understanding tenant rights becomes so important. Every state has laws in place to protect renters from unsafe and uninhabitable living conditions.
So it's not just about feeling uncomfortable or inconvenienced.
Right.
There are actual legal standards landlords have to meet.
Absolutely. And these laws cover a wide range of issues, from basic sanitation and pest control to things like heating, ventilation, and structural integrity.
Okay.
The specifics vary from state to state.
Right.
But the underlying principle is that landlords have a legal obligation to provide a safe and habitable living environment for their tenants.
So in Tiara's case, she's alleging that the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, her landlord, failed to meet these standards, and that's the basis for her lawsuit.
Exactly. And the evidence we've seen so far, the photos, the Citizen App reports, seem to support her claims.
Yeah.
Now, winning in small claims court isn't always easy, but having strong evidence like this can significantly strengthen her case.
Right. And going back to the court documents, it mentions that Tiara is also seeking $2,666.66 in unpaid rent. What's the story there?
Well, it seems like at some point she stopped paying rent. This is a common tactic for tenants who feel their landlord isn't holding up their end of the lease agreement.
Okay.
It's a way of saying, I'm not going to keep paying you until you fix these problems.
I can see how that would make sense, but isn't it risky? Couldn't she get evicted for not paying rent?
It's definitely a risk, and landlords can absolutely pursue eviction proceedings if rent isn't paid. But in situations like this where a tenant can demonstrate that the living conditions were genuinely uninhabitable,
Yeah.
it can become a legal defense against eviction. Of course, the specifics of each case matter, and it's always best to consult with a legal professional before withholding rent.
That's good advice. So in a way, it becomes a bit of a standoff. The tenant withholding rent until the landlord addresses the issues and the landlord potentially pursuing eviction if the rent isn't paid?
It can be, and that's where knowing your rights and having strong documentation is crucial. And speaking of documentation, there's another detail in the court documents that caught my eye. It mentions a work order Tiara submitted to Healthy Housing Foundation back in January of 2023.
Oh, right. There's actually a photo of that work order in the files we received. Let me see. It looks like she complained about her heater not turning off and even said she was going to sleep in an oven because it was so hot.
That's a key piece of evidence. It shows that Tiara was actively trying to communicate these issues to her landlord. This work order, if authenticated, could be a game changer for her case. It demonstrates that she made an effort to resolve the issues through the proper channels before resorting to legal action.
It makes her claims seem even more credible, right? Like she wasn't just trying to get out of paying rent.
Right.
She genuinely felt like her living situation was unbearable.
Exactly. It adds weight to her argument that the landlord was neglecting their responsibilities. And from a legal standpoint, it helps establish a timeline of events and shows that Tiara was taking steps to address the issues.
So putting it all together, the lawsuit, the photos, the citizen app reports, and now this work order, what do you think it means for Tiara's case? Does she have a good chance of winning?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say for sure, but based on what we've seen so far, she seems to have a strong case. The evidence seems to support her claims of uninhabitable living conditions, and the work order suggests she made efforts to resolve the issues with her landlord before taking legal action. Of course, there are always two sides to every story, and we haven't heard the landlord's perspective.
Right.
But from what we know, Tiara's case appears compelling.
It's definitely a lot to process. We've gone through all the materials you sent, the court documents, the photos, the citizen app alerts,
Yeah.
and it feels like we've uncovered a story that's bigger than just one woman in her apartment.
You're right. On the surface, this is about a tenant seeking compensation for uninhabitable living conditions. But it also speaks to broader society issues like access to safe and affordable housing, the balance of power between landlords and tenants, and the legal systems in place to protect people's rights.
It's a reminder that these issues touch countless lives every day, and that even seemingly small cases like this can have far-reaching implications.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it makes you think about what this means for anyone out there, who's renting. What are the takeaways here? What can we learn from Tiara's story?
Well, first and foremost, it really highlights the importance of knowing your rights as a tenant.
Yeah,
Familiarize yourself with the laws in your state,
right.
understand what your landlord is obligated to provide, and what steps you can take if those standards aren't being met.
Right. Because it's not just about having a place to live.
Right.
It's about having a safe and habitable place to live.
Exactly.
And if you do find yourself in a situation like Tiara's where those basic needs aren't being met, what should you do?
Documentation is key.
Okay.
Take photos, keep records of any communication with your landlord, and, if possible, file official complaints with your local housing authority or tenants' rights organization.
So that if it does come down to taking legal action, like in Tiara's case, you have a solid record of what happened.
Exactly. That documentation could be invaluable in proving your case and ensuring your rights are protected. And beyond the legal aspects, remember that there are resources available to help tenants facing these kinds of challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid to reach out to local organizations that specialize in tenants' rights. They can provide guidance, support, and even legal assistance.
It's a good reminder that you don't have to go through this alone. There are people out there who can help. As we wrap up, I keep thinking about how this case, while specific to one woman and her apartment,
Right.
really opens like a broader conversation about affordable housing,
Yeah,
tenants' rights, and the systems in place to protect vulnerable individuals.
it does. And hopefully by shedding light on these issues, we can contribute to a more informed and empowered community.
It's about sparking those conversations, asking those tough questions, and ultimately working towards a system that's more equitable and just for everyone.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little empowering. Remember, knowledge is power. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll catch you next time.